Part 4, The Song of Dreambender. Chapter 22, told from the point of view of Callie. The music place rose up before us, spread out across the sky. It looked real, but I had the feeling that if I reached out to touch it, my hand would pass straight through. The woman led us beside the waterfall and up to the shapes that seemed like a building. I touched one and my hand didn't pass through. The surface was warm. It was solid and shiny. In it, I could see my reflection. My hair was a mess. My clothes were too. Beside me stood Jeremy, staring upward. The silvery shapes like Jeremy and me showed flaws when you got up close. There were dents. Vines and branches had grown over and between. The woman led us up some steps that were cleverly hidden among the shapes. We were almost to the top. I looked behind me. Trees stretched as far as I could see. When I turned back around, a dark figure was blocking my way, silhouetted against the clouds. His shoulders were broad and his hair stuck out in clumps. His hands grabbed for me. "Oh!" he bellowed. I stumbled back, nearly falling. Jeremy caught me and turned to the figure. "Who are you?" he demanded. The woman chuckled. "That's Booker. Don't mind him." The sun went down behind a cloud and Booker's face emerged. He had dark skin and freckles with brown eyes that searched me. His arms were still extended, but now they seemed to be reaching out, not grabbing. The woman said, "I met Booker years ago in between. He wandered by one day, lost and confused. I liked him and we became friends. He's been with me ever since. He doesn't talk, but he understands." The woman reached at the top of the steps, gently guided Booker to one side and gestured to us. "Come in, won't you?" She opened a door. I moved past Booker, who smiled. Inside, it was like a different building, a different world. The shapes and reflections were gone. So was the brightness. Instead, there was wood, warm, dark, comforting. We were high up in an immense room like Sal's cave, but 100 times larger, surrounded by seats. In the ceiling was a huge window with light streaming to the floor. Far below us, a platform shone like a jewel. The woman followed my gaze. "That's the stage," she said. "It's where I play music. The sound is wonderful." A figure stepped onto the platform. Squinting to see it, I realized it was Booker. I wondered how he had gone so quickly from the steps to the stage. He clicked his tongue and laughed softly. I heard the sounds clearly, as if he were standing beside me. Then he wandered off, blending into the dark brown walls. The woman smiled. "This place is remarkable, isn't it? It's always been this way, like a beautiful instrument." "What's an instrument?" asked Jeremy. I was startled to see him standing beside me. For a moment there, it seemed like just me and the woman. The woman held up her golden stick. "This is an instrument. I use it to play music. Would you like to hear more?" She knelt on the stage at the center of that vast, empty space and filled it with music. She breathed into the golden stick, moving the keys, changing the tones, lifting us up to where the lights came from. Each note was separate and distinct, and yet they blended together to create long, looping melodies, songs you had wanted to chase and explore. We might have listened 5 minutes or 5 hours, I couldn't say which. Then the woman stopped and moved to the edge of the stage, where she sat down and dangled her feet off the side, gazing fondly at us. "Long ago, before the warming," she said, "music belonged to the people. They gathered in groups called orchestras and 100 members or more and made music together." I thought of Deb's story and Pam's drawing of the music place. They had made it into a myth, but the woman's words seemed different, like something in the real world. "Each person played an instrument," the woman continued. "One of the instruments was this one, the flute." She lifted the gold stick and held it up for us better to see. So, it was called a flute. I liked my name better. Some instruments were made of wood, such as bassoons, oboes, and clarinets. The trumpets, trombones, French horns, and tubas were made of brass. Some things you would hit, like the drums, timpani, and xylophones. Some, like violins, violas, cellos, and basses, had strings that you plucked and bowed. Her face lit up when she recited the names, as if they were old friends. Then she looked over at me and cocked her head. "I think you play an instrument." I thought of my voice. I didn't hit it, pluck it, or blow into it, but it made music. Surely it was an instrument, too. Jeremy studied the woman. "How did you know about the instruments?" "An old man told me." "Was he in an orchestra?" asked Jeremy. She looked at him thoughtfully. No, but he carried on their tradition. The orchestras died out during the warming, and these beautiful musicians dropped away one by one. Their instruments were lost, except for a few like this one. The man taught me to play it as he had been taught, along with others stretching back through time. The orchestras are gone. Now I'm the orchestra. The woman smiled, then closed her eyes, brought the golden stick to her lips, and blew. The notes formed a picture in my mind as lovely as anything Alicia had ever painted. When she finished, Jeremy said, "Who was the old man? How did you meet him?" The woman looked past Jeremy to another time and place. "It happened on Freedom Day. I was 13 years old. That day my parents let me roam the city. I was exploring an alley and heard something. It was music, the forbidden sound. But it was like nothing I'd ever heard. It seemed to be solid, tall, wide, deep, with every color of the rainbow. I followed it and came to an open window. Peering inside, I saw an old man sitting at a table that had a machine on top of it. The machine was a wooden box with a round, flat platform on top and a flared horn sticking up from the back. On the side was a handle, and when the old man cranked it, the platform spun around. There was a plastic disc on that platform, and on top of that was a metal arm with a needle at one end. As the disc spun, music poured from the horn. I don't know how long I stood there listening. The man put on disc after disc, each with a different kind of music. I went inside and he showed me more discs, which he called records. He had boxes of them. The machine was a phonograph, the sound of an orchestra. The man had never heard an orchestra in person, but he had learned to play an instrument. It was the trumpet, a brass horn that he blew to create melodies. When I asked him if I could try it, he gave me this flute. From the moment I touched it, it was like part of my body. The old man taught me to play melodies on it. Jeremy looked at me. I could tell he was thinking, so I said it for him. Music is forbidden. Didn't someone try to stop you? You know, the catchers or the Dreambenders? Oh, yes, I know all about them. She studied Jeremy. You're one of them, aren't you? But you seem different. How do you know about the Dreambenders? He asked. That's a different story for a different time. As for your first question, I held on to music by avoiding the catchers and following directions. Directions? I said. On the phonograph, taped to the bottom and handed down through the generations. The directions explained that sometimes, suddenly, we would lose interest in music for a while. Dreambenders, said Jeremy. That's right, though the early musicians didn't know the word. The directions said that whenever we lost interest, we should keep playing the phonograph, and our love of music would return. And it did for musician after musician, for the old man and for me. He let you play it? He nodded. He had reinforced one of his rooms so it was soundproof. That's where we played the phonograph. It's where he gave me music lessons. Music lessons? What an idea, that you didn't just hear music or play it. You worked at it. You studied it to get better. That day when you met him, I said, why wasn't he in the soundproof room? Why was the window open? Freedom Day, said Jeremy. The woman smiled. That's right. It was the one day of the year when he risked bringing the photograph out into the open. One small gesture of defiance. I looked down around at the music place with its warm brown walls and vaulted ceiling. How did you get here? Years later, after I'd grown up, the old man realized his health was failing, and he said he had something to show me. He brought me to the music place. The minute I saw it, I knew I had come home. When the old man died, he left me the phonograph and records. I brought them to the music place, and I've lived here ever since. Jeremy said, the Dreambenders haven't found you? Can't they follow your dreams? We didn't have to, someone said. We followed you. Or rather, I followed you. I turned around. There, grinning, was Leaf.